Can I ask, I always believe that parents shape us in ways that we maybe didn't expect. When you think about yours, what do you think you're running towards, and what do you think you're running from, Simon?
When I think about my parents?
Your parents and your upbringing and how it shaped you.
Well, I mean, I had a pretty amazing childhood. I mean, I got to live on 4 continents by the age of 10 years old. And my sister and I, even though we're very different personalities, we're incredibly close because of the way we grew up, because we kept getting uprooted and moving schools and moving friends, but we always had each other. And again, even though we're pretty different personalities, we're both very comfortable being in new places. We're both very comfortable sort of figuring stuff out, pretty resourceful, because that's how we grew up. When you say what you're running towards or running from, I mean, based on my childhood, I mean, it's made me comfortable in the unfamiliar. And so when things are not moving for me, I'm very comfortable changing course, because to me, being resourceful is fun. You know, it's not a panic. It's more like a puzzle. So, I mean, I'm very grateful to my childhood for that. When you say what I'm running from, because we kept moving a lot, you know, I don't have childhood roots. I don't have a childhood home that I grew up in. The first home that I grew up in, I was 10 years old. So, I mean, I have a childhood home from the age of 10, but I don't have nothing earlier than that, because we didn't stay in one place for very long. And I think because of the lifestyle that I've led, even for my career, I traveled a lot. And staying home became like the best thing in the world. So I think the one thing that I guess I'm running from is the constant uprooting. I actually really like having a home base now.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask, I spoke to Asaf before the show, who introduced us, and he said, you need to ask Simon, what do you want to be when you grow up? Which was a strange question, but I thought I would roll with it given he made the intro. What's the answer?
I mean, as a little kid, I wanted to be an astronaut, and I went to space camp in Huntsville, Alabama at the age of 13. And I liked the idea, and then I liked the idea of being an aeronautical engineer, but I wasn't. That sort of didn't last for very long. But and somebody asked me once, why did you want to be an astronaut? Which I'd never really thought about. And if I think, if I go back and thought, the reason I wanted to be an astronaut is I wanted to be able to go to a place and have a perspective. I wanted a perspective of the world that most people don't have. And then I wanted to come down and tell people what I saw so they could be struck with the same wonder that I got to have. And then I sort of smiled when I gave the answer and realized I am an astronaut. I try and see the world from a different perspective, and I try and report back what I see with the hope that people will see the perspective that I see as well, to help them see the world in a new way.
If you apply like another why to that, why do you want to inspire people with wonder and awe on a thing that they haven't seen? Is it because you love to delight people? Is it because you love to educate people?
I think it's just ingrained. I believe in sharing. I think it's selfish not to share. There are people who, when they find something magical, they want to hoard it and hide it. If they figure something out, they don't want to tell anybody because they believe that it gives them some sort of, upper hand or some sort of advantage in life or at work. And I like sharing. I like, if I see something, I want to share it with people. If I discover something, I want to tell people about it. I just think it's a nice way to live a life. And I think everybody should do the same. Sharing your feelings with your loved ones, sharing your ideas with the people you work with. All those things matter. There's an entire section in the bookshop called self-help, and there's no section in the bookshop called help others. We've overdone it on taking and hoarding and being self-involved. And I think our society could do with a little more balance, a little more giving to manage all the taking.
You've shared so much wisdom over the years, and one thing that kind of struck me when I was kind of thinking about this conversation was there a catalytic moment in the rise of Simon Sinek? Was it the TED Talk in 2008, 2009? Was it the second book? Was it the first book? What was that moment when actually the Simon Sinek brand really became so well known?
Like so many things, there's not an answer to that question. That's like asking me, when you started working out, when was the moment you got into shape? It's like, I don't know the answer to that question. There's a process that you follow and you find yourself in shape. It's an evolution. It's not a switch. And so the same is for my career. I committed myself to a process that I believed in and still believe in desperately. One is starting with why. I believe desperately that if both in your own mentality and the way you talk and communicate, you start with what you believe rather than what you do. And the second thing is the law of diffusion of innovations, which is all populations sift across the standard deviation, the bell curve. If you have high performers, you have low performers, and you have an average, always, 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 regardless of the size of the population. And the law of diffusion tells us that the early adopters are more likely to take a risk and try something new. And you need to get a critical mass of those, 15 to 18%, in order to create a tipping point. Because the majority won't try something until someone else has tried it first. And most people, when they're trying to build a brand or spread a technology or share an idea, whatever they're trying to do, they aim all of their effort at the majority because that's where the market is, right? Except that's completely wrong, because the market is cynical and practical. They want to know what do I get? Will I get my money back if it goes wrong? They're constantly sort of pushing for more. Where the early adopters will spend more money, more energy, more effort to be a part of something that reflects their beliefs. And once I learned that, and I started talking about what I believed, I started talking about why, the people who I preferred to work with and chose to work with were the ones who shared my beliefs. They said things like, "You're onto something. I don't think it's perfect, but I think you're onto something special." Even though they could pay me very little money, I would work with them. And in the early days, I was living hand to fist. I mean, I didn't have a dollar. Or, for example, because I started with why, they would say, "There's somebody you need to meet who I know will believe what you believe." Or believes what you believe. And I said yes to those introductions, were the ones that they said, "There's somebody you should meet," whatever. It was always financially driven. I sort of would be a little more cynical. And I remember a real life example of a guy who called me up and very, very early on. And remember, again, I was living hand to fist. And the guy said to me, I remember the exact phone call. He said, "I got your number from whoever." He said, I've heard you're good at your work. Convince me why I should hire you." And I said, "Don't." Because anybody who says, "Convince me why I should ... has just told me that they're not an early adopter. That's not a position of curiosity, right? That's a position of sell to me. And so I would turn down business from people who sat in the majority and focus exclusively on the early adopters. And that's what made my career and my brand grow. Because I didn't spend any money on marketing.
What would an early adopter say instead of "Sell me why I should hire you"?
No, I mean, it's like I said, they show it with curiosity. Like, "I've heard about you. Your ideas are really interesting. I'd love to learn more. You're onto something. It's not perfect, but I think you're really onto something." Like that's what early adopters. Early adopters sound really curious.